Welcome back, everybody. It's another day in daily fantasy baseball. Another great day, actually. Last night was a good night for the pitchers. We had guys like Jose Quintana got a win. Tyson Ross pitched well before he got removed for precautionary reasons. We thought there was going to be a trade, but it was just for precautionary reasons, so he didn't hurt himself. Luckily, so there was a trade in the works, so he didn't get hurt, so they wouldn't be able to trade him. The last guy I wanted to talk about was from last night was John Lackey. He was excellent. Didn't expect that strikeout output, but he was an excellent move for cash games, and of course, some of the other guys pitched well as well. The one guy that didn't pitch well was Bartolo Colon, and he had a good matchup, but we mentioned that we weren't big fans of him simply because he hasn't been good in the last 10 or 15 starts, and it just doesn't seem to happen anymore. Maybe this is the last year we're going to see Bartolo in Major League Baseball, which is going to upset a lot of people, but hey, things are the way they are. Looking into today's slate, we have 11 games, and there's 5 aces pitching today. That we have Chris Sale against Boston in Fenway Park. We have Jake Arrieta at Miller Park against the Milwaukee Brewers. Carlos Martinez against the Rockies. Carlos Carrasco against the A's, and then Shelby Miller faces the Phillies in Citizens Bank. Of these 5 aces, I really only like 2 of them, and I want to talk about why. The first guy, obviously, is Chris Sale. Is the top option pretty much anytime he pitches, especially tonight with some other options not being so high on the list. But, of course, he pitches in the hitter's park in Fenway Park, but it doesn't really matter. When you watch Sale, he has some of the best stuff, if not the best stuff in baseball from the left side of the mound, and he just makes for an excellent play. And the Red Sox have actually struggled relatively against lefties this year. So he's number 1 pitcher today. He's going to be very expensive, but I think you have to have him in cash games. The other pitcher I like today is of that bunch is Shelby Miller against the Phillies. We talked about the Phillies' struggles against right-handed pitching all year long. They haven't struck out a lot, but Miller is a guy like Lackey and a guy like Michael Wacha, who I discussed. It's a very good cash game option because he's simply is very consistent. He works deep into the games. He has a good chance to get a win, especially against the Phillies team that has the worst record in baseball, despite the fact that they've won, I believe, 10 of 12 in the second half of the season after the All-Star break. Those other 3, I want to talk about why I don't like them. The first one was Jake Arrieta against Milwaukee. He is the one guy that I would use of this bunch in GPPs simply because he has that strikeout upside. But I'm not a huge fan of his against the Brewers because they've actually been hitting the ball a lot better of late, especially with the Ryan Braun and Jonathan Lucroy and everybody being in that lineup and everybody's healthy. So I do like Arrieta in GPPs because of the ability he has to strike hitters out. It's one of the best curveballs in baseball. But I'm not a big fan of his in the realm that I'd rather spend on guys like Sale and have a little bit cheaper than for a guy like Miller rather than spending on a guy like Arrieta who doesn't have a fantastic matchup. The other guys are Carlos Martinez and Carlos Carrasco, and if you've seen these guys pitch, they're quite interchangeable, not just their first name. They both have really good fastballs with a lot of movement, excellent sliders, and actually have similar matchups today in terms of the opponents being able to hit. The Colorado Rockies are one of the best teams in baseball against right-handed pitchers, and the Oakland A's, who Carrasco faces, Martinez faces the Rockies, are one of the better hitters, hitting teams, rather, against right-handed pitching as well. Now, the one difference is the Rockies strike out a little bit more, so that would give Martinez a little bit of a bump, but they're also hitting the ball a lot harder than the A's, who don't strike out a lot either as well. So between those two guys are I like to target in good matchups. For today, bad matchups against the Rockies and the A's, I just can't seem to get behind them. Of the guys that I just talked about, Sale and Miller will be my cash game plays. But as always, we like to detail at least 1 or 2 cheap plays because everybody knows about those expensive pitchers. That's why they're expensive, and a lot of people have them. That's why they're highly owned every night. But normally I have 3 or 4 pitchers to discuss who are a little bit cheaper. But unfortunately, with today's slate, there's only one cheap guy I do like, and that's Jimmy Nelson against the Cubs. The Cubs have one of the highest strikeout rates in baseball, and it's even higher against right-handed pitching. I believe it's not 24%. It's really close to it. And the Cubs' offense has been really bad of late, and I'm not sure if I can exaggerate that even more. They're hitting just .216 in the last month. I think they're hitting just .220 in the last 14 days, but that's a small sample size with the All-Star break. But .216 in the last month is 29th in baseball. We expected a lot more from that Cubs offense with all those young prospects, with Chris Bryant, Dexter Fowler at the top of that order, Jorge Soler in that lineup as well, Addison Russell, guys like that. They just can't seem to hit the ball well, and it's been really bad of late. So I'd like to target a pitcher against an offense that's struggling, especially a right-handed pitcher against the Cubs because he has that strikeout upside as well. Now, the thing with Nelson is, although he did struggle in the middle half of this year, or the middle of the first half, rather, one of the things about him is he has the ability to strike out a lot of guys. And against the Cubs, which we just talked about, that's a good benefit. Another thing with Nelson is in his last 10 starts, I believe he has 6 or 7 of them where he's allowed 3 earned runs or less, and that's big. And his last 3 starts, he shut down some pretty good offenses. We're looking at offenses like the Diamondback, the Pirates, who have been hitting the ball well since the All-Star break, and the Dodgers. So for a guy that shut down two really good offenses and one offense that's been pretty good, that's impressive to see. And he's going to be facing an offense that struggles a lot today. So I think in my tournament plays, Nelson will be my cheap guy, and I can pair him with Sale and throw forward some bats I like. Pretty much ends up all the pitchers I like today. I wish I had more for you guys, but sometimes when there's not that great of a slate, there's only a few pitchers you want to target. You don't want to look at guys that may have good matchups, but you don't like them as pitchers, because there are a few guys we do like. There may not be big variance for different lineups today, but there aren't really many guys that I like to pick from. And 2 guys I have seen other people talk about, and I wanted to mention why I don't like them, are Phil Hughes and Matt Shoemaker. I can't trust either of those pitchers because they have tendencies to get blown up. Now, obviously, Jimmy Nelson has a tendency to get blown up as well. But when you're looking at who Nelson faces in the Cubs, and they haven't been hitting the ball as well, guys like Phil Hughes, who faces the Mariners today, and Matt Shoemaker, who faces the Astros, they have a little bit worse matchups today. First of all, we'll talk about Shoemaker, who pitches for the Angels and faces the Astros. Now, the Astros strikeout rate is absurd. It's the highest in baseball, as high as we've seen in a while. But you have to think about how that offense hits the ball. They lead baseball in home runs. They lead baseball in slugging percentage, if I'm not mistaken. They definitely lead baseball on isolated power. So they do score runs in bunches, and it's a big thing for a guy like Shoemaker, because if he gets a couple guys on base and then one of those 9 guys in that Astros lineup who can hit a home run, it's a home run, you're looking at 3 earned runs right off the bat. So I can't trust either one of these 2. And Phil Hughes is the other guy, faces the Mariners, but it's in Target Field, which is a lot smaller park, and it's more of a hitter's park than Safeco Field. So I don't like him, even though Robinson Cano may be out tonight. So between Hughes and Shoemaker, who are the other 2 cheap options others are talking about, I can't go with either one of them. I'd rather have a guy like Jimmy Nelson and then spend up on pitching. I think that's what you do have to do tonight, especially in cash game. Spend up on Sale if you want to. Spend up on Miller as your second pitcher. And for GPPs, you want a cheaper bat or cheaper pitcher, Jimmy Nelson is that guy. You're going to need some cheap pitching, though, in these GPPs, because once again, we have the Blue Jays against the lefty. We have the White Sox against knuckleballers, and they have been successful against knuckleballers in their career. So if you do want to save some money in these tournaments, Jimmy Nelson is your guy. But I think in cash game, you definitely have to target the best pitcher on the slate, Chris Sale, and try to work your way in Southern Miller. That wraps up our pitching slate for today. As always, be sure to check the RotoCurve tools. We're updated almost every day, especially the new daily favorable matchup tool, the bomb detector. Everything you can use to your advantage to help you win some money. The last thing I wanted to talk about is there are 3 weather games today. Danielle tweeted about it this morning, so be sure to keep an eye out for those and keep an eye out for Danielle's video, as she will be discussing which games could be a little bit of a target for weather. And if the weather's going to be bad, I know the Atlanta and Philadelphia game may be an issue. That's something you want to look at for your pitchers. So look out for that. It'll be out around 5:30, if not a little bit before that. And the lineups page, as always, will be updated when the lineups begin to come out. So check everything out, use everything to your advantage. And once again, let's win some money tonight. Good luck, everybody.